The death toll from a powerful earthquake that's hit northern Afghanistan in the early hours of the morning has risen to at least 20, while hundreds have been injured. The country, though, is still recovering after a deadly quake in August killed more than 2,000 people. Let's get the latest and go live now to Kabul, where I'm joined by Ali Latifi, Asia editor at the New Humanitarian. Ali, thank you so much for your time today. Firstly, what are you hearing from people on the ground in northern Afghanistan? How bad has the damage been?
Well, I can tell you, for instance, in one village, 800 homes were destroyed. They were either completely destroyed or partially destroyed, but that in itself sort of shows what has been happening. You talked about an earthquake earlier, about a couple months ago, and the situation is almost always the same. The most affected areas are always the more remote areas, the less developed areas, and in these areas, people have their homes are simple structures. They're adobe, they're mud, they're stone, and they're really not made to withstand this kind of impact. But they make these homes because that's all they have at their disposal. And as with, again, the August earthquake, this happened in the middle of the night. And so people were not prepared in any way for it. They woke up in the middle of the night. They had to rush out into the streets if they were in the cities. They had to rush out essentially just outside if they were in the villages. And obviously, the highest number of injuries come from the fact that these houses essentially collapse in on people. And clearly, in the dark, it's much more difficult to reach people, to dig them out, to take them where they need to go, to get them to the closest hospital. So it's really a number of factors affecting sort of the casualty count and the level of damage.
Yes, and given the fact that you said that this happened in rather remote areas and villages, what can you tell us then about the search and rescue operation?
So the government has dispatched a search and rescue operation. Different other foreign governments and the United Nations have also promised assistance. But as of right now, the government is handling it, and they have ordered all the hospitals in the region to be prepared for incoming arrivals for the injured. But again, this is something that happened 2 months ago after the earthquakes in the east, and also 2 years ago after the earthquakes in the western Herat province. And that's basically that hospitals in Afghanistan have lost vast amounts of funding, both because in 2023, the ICRC cut funding to 20 of the biggest hospitals in the country, including the hospitals that would treat the people in those three major earthquakes over the last couple of years. And numerous hospitals in more remote areas and clinics have been shut because of the ICRC cuts, because of the US aid cuts, and because of other foreign aid cuts that followed the US's aid cut decision last year.
Yes, and of course, there are reports from government sources that they expect the death toll to rise further. How much worse do you expect it to get?
It's really hard to know how much worse it can get, but I think that depends very much on how accessible the roads are, how easily rescuers are able to get to the area and to get people out. Because in terms of the August earthquake, one of the biggest issues was the fact that entire roads were either blocked or destroyed. And we spoke to aid workers who basically said they had to stop their car in the middle of a road and then walk 4 or 5 more hours to the nearest village to deliver aid and then bring aid back out or bring people back out, highly reliant on helicopters. So it really depends on how easily and quickly the rescuers, so far the government appointed rescuers, are able to reach the area.
As with previous earthquakes, Ali, there have been aftershocks. Have any been reported in the context of this one, or are more expected in the coming hours and days?
Not yet, but this is another issue, is that, again, for the last two major earthquakes in the east and in the west in Herat, the aftershocks were a major issue because they were very high magnitude aftershocks. They were in the high fives and the low sixes, not very far off from the initial earthquakes in terms of magnitude. And so that obviously creates fear amongst the people. This was a big issue in Herat in 2023. People were afraid to sleep in their homes. In the city, people were sleeping outside in parks and on streets. Those who had land outside the city were going to those areas just to get away from any sort of like high structure. So it has both a mental impact and also obviously a physical impact if they occur, that then more damage is done.
Yes, and can you remind us again, in the context of the August earthquake, are those areas worst hit in that earthquake still recovering from that? And how does it compound what authorities in Afghanistan have to do with this new earthquake?
Of course, they're still dealing with it. You know, they're still trying to get their homes rebuilt. They're still trying to get assistance in. Some are trying to move to different areas. And this is sort of the problem that Afghanistan keeps facing after these natural disasters, is that it brings attention to these remote areas that never received much development, much funding, much assistance. And people remember, oh, they live in like really dismal conditions and really bare bones conditions. So it becomes very reactive. It's not, you know, proactive in the sense that in the cities it's getting better with new construction. They're really trying to make sure that they're earthquake proof. But outside the cities, as I said, it's people just essentially building the houses themselves with whatever material is around them. And so what ends up happening is that, I mean, to be quite honest, you know, people in Herat are still dealing with the after effects of their earthquake 2 years ago. And then so now you have one from 2 months ago, and you're going from the north to the east to the west, you know, all in the span of 2 years. And again, um, it's this issue that a lot of these areas are places that the government had very little access to for either security reasons or just didn't really put in the effort, didn't have the money to reach, you know, aid cuts. All of this affects that. And it all sadly ends up being very reactive.
Yes, and from what you've been telling me for the past few minutes, Ali, it seems like the country does desperately need a lot of international assistance to come in, but that coming at a time when you mentioned earlier that even the ICRC has cut funding to Afghanistan.
Right. And so this is the major issue. You know, most of them cite funding problems, which is what the ICRC cited 2 years ago. Some, you know, talk about the political situation, say, oh, like human rights issues and things like that. But, you know, to people on the ground, the issue is you don't have to like the government in order to help the people in need, you know. And there's obviously issues of hypocrisy. Israel receives plenty of aid despite, you know, many human rights concerns. So people will say, why do they get assistance? Why do we not? You know, why are you mixing politics with aid? And so this.
Okay, Ali Latifi in Kabul, we do thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.